Hello everyone. So today I'm doing a quick recording to go over the Orbis SDK and to have a small workshop for the EthCC hackathon that we will be sponsoring. So during this video, I will go over all of the SDK functions, and we are going to try to build a very simple commenting system that will be fully leveraging the Orbis SDK. So the first part will be connecting using Orbis. Then we will create posts, which will be actual comments, and then we will be able to retrieve the post using the Orbis get post function. So all of the developer documentation is available on orbis.club/developers. And basically you have some examples in the getting started guide, and as well as all of the functions available in the API documentation function. So this is probably going to be the part that we will be using the most today. So, and just one additional thing, the API documentation is mainly divided in two parts. So we have write functions, which are all of the functions that are actually being used to share content on Orbis, and all of the get functions, which are the functions that can let you retrieve data from Orbis, because basically everything being shared on Orbis is stored on Ceramic, so it's publicly available, and we made it easy to query all of the Orbis content shared on Ceramic with those very simple functions to call to make it easier and more performant for developers. So the project, as I was saying, the project that we are going to build today is basically going to be a decentralized commenting system. So if you look at many projects in this space, for example, let's take EtherScan as an example. EtherScan has a commenting feature where you can go to a smart contract address and then comments in the specific context of the smart contracts. But most of the time, those commenting systems are just stored on a centralized database, right? Whereas with Orbis, developers could build commenting threads in a fully decentralized way. And because everything being shared on Orbis is using the specific schemas that we created, all of the content shared using this commenting application, for example, will be fully composable with other part of Orbis, right? So for example, let's say that I go to an app that is using the Orbis SDK for its document strip, for its comment strip, for its commenting system, and I share a comment under in this specific project. If people are following me on Orbis and they go to orbis.club, for example, or any other app actually built on Orbis, they would be able to view my comment, right? So that's creating a fully decentralized and composable social graph, which is basically going to represent all of your social activity that is being built on Orbis. So that's going to be the project that we build today. So I created a new React application, a very basic one. I started to add some CSS to make it a bit cleaner, but basically this is a very basic React application. I already installed the Orbis SDK, which is the first step, right? Installing the SDK. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start actually using it, right? So the first thing to do is to both import Orbis and also to actually create the Orbis object. So here I just imported the Orbis SDK, and I create here an Orbis object. And this Orbis object is basically going to contain all of the Ceramic information, all of your session information once you actually connect to Ceramic using Orbis. So this object must be used in all of your application, right? You can't, if you initialize new Orbis object in other components, then you're basically going to be disconnected, etc. So this Orbis object must be used everywhere. So you can pass it either as a props or as a context in the other component that will be using Orbis. So the first step, as I was saying, is to actually connect to Orbis, right? So what we do here is we are going to create a function that is going to connect to Orbis. I'm going to make it asynchronous. And basically what this function is going to do is it's going to like connect to your wallet and get your wallet to sign a specific message, which is going to create your ceramic identity, which will then be used in Orbis, right? So the connects function is very simple. It works like this. So you just basically do this, and then the results return, if the connection is successful, will contain the user details, right? So you can use it to display the username of the user or the profile picture that the user is using. So here we can have, we can just try to, as a test, results from login from connect, just to see if it's working. Now that I have this function, I will go back to the browser, open the JavaScript console, and basically I'm going to click on the connect button. It's automatically opening a MetaMask pop-up. And this MetaMask pop-up is basically asking me to sign this message, which is going to create your ceramic session in Orbis with the specific decentralized identity that you're using with this wallet. Right, so this is what's happening here. And you can see that indeed we received a positive result from the connect function, right? So we can see that the user is actually connected, and we have the user details here, which we can use, right? So the profile, for example, contains the description of the user. This is the description that I added on Orbis, as well as my profile picture and my username. So now you can say something, you can store this in state, right? So you can say, for example, user, this is usually what I do, set user. State initially it's null, then if the function, if the status return is at 200, then we can actually store the resultant state, right? So what we are going to store is the wall details, I think, so that we can have access to both the did and the profile. So let's do it. So we're going to store this details. And here we can have a condition that says that this connect button should be visible only if the user is not connected already, right? So here we can say if user can have a simple text message that says connected with user. I can do this username. So now that we have this, we can go back to the browser, refresh the page, and then try to connect again. So it's doing the same thing. I can sign the message, and here now I can see that I'm connected. So it's basically, it created a ceramic session, and my did is actually connected to it. So the issue that we have here is that if we refresh, the connection is going to be lost. So we have another function, because basically it's going to be lost because it's resetting the ceramic object. And so what we can do here is you can use this function when your app is mounting to check if there is already a valid ceramic session stored in local storage for this application, right? So we can use it on mount. So I'm going to use effect for this. And basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of going to do the same thing as I'm doing with the connect to Orbis function but I'm going to create another one, which is going to be very similar. So this is also we're going to name it check connect to Orbis, and instead of calling the connect function, I'm calling the isConnected function. So this is doing the exact same thing, but instead of immediately asking the user to actually connect using MetaMask, etc., this function isConnected will reconnect to an already existing session string stored in local storage, right? So this is not going to trigger any MetaMask action. So if there isn't any session stored in local storage, then this function will just do nothing, right? So the user will still have to connect, clicking on your button. But if there is one, it will automatically connect the user. So let's go back to the browser one more time. We check and we see that this is what's happening, right? So automatically when the app is mounting, it's reconnecting the user using the session string stored in Ceramic. By default, sessions created using Orbis are valid for 31 days or 30 days, I believe. But you can modify this, or you could decide to not use it at all. So here the user is by default connected. You can see that if I refresh, it's still working. And so now we can actually, now that the user is connected, we can actually start creating content with this decentralized identity, right? So now this is going to be the next step, is we are going to have component that can be used to share content, textual content. So share your content. This is a very simple text area. Let's see what it's doing here. We can see it here. We can have a condition to show it only if the user is connected, right? Because if a user is not connected, it can't actually share content. We can have this. And we can also have a button to actually share the content. Sure, so how does it look like here? So that's what we have here, right? We can make the text area a bit bigger. Okay, now it's working. And now what I want is I want the users to be able to type content here and be able to share it as a post, right? So what I'm doing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use like the basic way to handle content in inputs in React. So I'm going to save it in state, right? So it's going to be like this. Content set content. Here, the value of the text area will actually be the content from the state. And I'm going to have a very basic unchanged function that is going to be storing the value of the text area in the state so that we can use it then to actually share it. So let's check one more time. It's still working. And now what I want is I want clicking on this share button to actually trigger the creation of a post on Orbis. So here we can create a new function that is going to be the function that will actually trigger the post. And what this function, for this function to work, we are going to use a new function from the SDK, which is the create post function, right? So this create post can be very simple. So it's just works like this, where we say, okay, I'm going to create a post, and this post must have a body, right? So this body is actually going to be the content that is within the text area. So we do it, and then we can just log the result of this query result from share post to see what's happening within Orbis. Before proceeding, I just want to add something where, because if a brand new user logs in, is not going to have a username object because the profile will be empty. So I'm just going to add a quick condition here to say that we show the username of only if the user actually has one, or we can just show the did itself, which all users have. So that's a small details. So now we have this share post function, which is being triggered by clicking on this button. Let's try to share this now. So I go back to my browser, I'm still connected. I'm going to try to share something. Working on the workshop video for the hackathon, right? So I can try to share this. I can look at the logs, and I can see that the post was shared successfully, right? And because the only parameter that was being passed here is the body, this post should be shared in what we call the global feed, right? And if that's the case, then if I go to orbis.club, which is showing all of the posts shared on the Orbis protocol, I should be able to view it, right? So I'm going to refresh Orbis and see. And here we can see that the post that I just shared here is actually, that I just shared using this new application, is actually visible here, right? And that's amazing. And because the post shared, all of the posts shared using the Orbis SDK are following the same schema, basically any app built on top of Orbis could be able to display those posts and to allow people to share their posts, but in a fully different UI than what we actually built here. So that's a very cool thing. So this is successful. Now, for the next step, what we are going to do is, because the goal of this workshop is to build a decentralized commenting system and not to share content in the global feed, we are going to go back to the developer documentation and update a bit our create post function to share to create the post in a specific context, right? So we are going, and the context is going to be a URL. So basically what we're doing is, instead of sharing the post in the global feed, we are going to share it on a context, which in our case, because we are building a commenting system that could be embedded on a website, the context could be, for example, the URL of the page the user is on, right? So let's say, for example, let's take the example of users browsing an NFT marketplace and wanting to comment under a specific NFT, right? So we are going to call this random NFT marketplace NFT land, and let's say that our imaginary NFT is actually on the Azuki collection and it has this specific ID. Then we could imagine a world in which I'm going to add a test. We could imagine a world in which this commenting system is embedded under this specific URL, right? And so when I share content now on using this create post function, but in this specific context, the post is still going to appear on the global feed, but it's going to be part of this context, which means that I can then query it using this context. And I can say, for example, afterward, I want to see all of the comments that have been shared under this specific context. So let's go back here. I'm going to refresh the page just to make sure. And then we do this, we can comment, for example, this is a test comment that could be shared under a specific NFT. So let's try using the context module. Let's do this. Okay, so if we share this, now we can say that this post has been shared successfully again. And if we do here, we can see that the post was shared in this specific context, which is what we wanted, right? And so now the next step for this is going to be able to display the post shared in this specific context. So for this, we're going to use another part of the documentation, which is the first, the query, which is the get post query, right? So with this get post, we can see that we have like the global Orbis get post function, and we can pass options to this function. And one of the options that we can pass is the context. So we go back to our code here, and we say, as we can create a new function, which is going to be load post from context. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to call this function here, right? Which is basically all of the posts returned by this function will be stored in this data object. But instead of calling it globally like this, we're going to call it for a specific context, which in our case is this random URL, right? And so what this will do is, if it should return an array of posts that should contain only one post, which is the one that we just shared. So data from context calls. So let's try this, and this we will want to load it on load, right? So basically when the user loads the page, it's immediately going to query from context, and it's going to initially just log the result here so that we can test if everything is working fine. So let's do this. And then we can see the result here, data from load post from context, and we can see that there is indeed an array of one post, and it contains the post that we just shared, right? Which is a good thing, right? It means that it's working, and we can see that it's also confirming the context. So then what we can do is we can actually store those posts in our state and do something like this, which is storing basically the array. And then on the web page, we can actually display those posts. So I'm going to create a new component here, which is going to pass this as an array. And here, what we are going to do is just return and display the array of posts that have been shared in this specific context, right? So now we can actually map all of those posts and display them in our UI, right? So we are going to use the simple map function, right? So this is looping through all the posts, and then we can return the details of each post, right? So we can just do a conditional thing to make sure that we unloop an empty object. So this would just be showing the loading state while the object actually contains some array, some posts. So here it's looping through all the posts, and it's going to display them one by one. And what we want to do here is go back to the documentation and see the kind of results that are returned by this function, right? So it returns an array, and each post object looks like this. So what we're interested in initially is just showing the body of the post itself. So it's going to be this post.content dot body, right? So let's see what it does here if we actually load this. So if we refresh the page, we can see that the comments are being loaded. So we can do maybe something like this, comments. We can add some styling. So this is loading all of the comments, and we could also display the details about the user who actually loaded this. Right, so here in that case, it would be, I would be doing this, where the first line that we want to render maybe is who actually shared the content. So it would be, can add a simple paragraph and say that it's being shared by, we can go back here and in the documentation, we can see that there is an object in each post object, which is named the creator details, and it returns the same, format that we were using for the connect function. So we can go over this creator details object and say that if we have a creator details profile object with a username being set up, then we actually display it, or we could display just the deed itself. So if we go back here, oh no, made a mistake, this should work better. So if we reload the page, it's loading and we can see that the comment is being shared by Baptiste here. So that's very cool. And then one last thing that we might want to have is maybe a divider for each post. So the divider is going to be very simple. Of the screen. Let's see what it looks like, and maybe smaller opacity, 0.5, 0.2, with some margin to have some space between each comment. Right, so that's how it's looking. And basically, if I would share a new comment here, it would be displayed right underneath, right? So like, for example, I can say this is another test comment for the hackathon workshop. I can share it. I can see that the sharing is successful. Here, if I go back to Orbis, I can see that this is actually being shared, right? So we can see that this is working fine. And if I refresh the page, I can see that the two comments are loading here. And basically that's how you could build a fully decentralized commenting system. If we wanted to go a bit further, we could, we should have like loading state for the share button. We could improve the styling, and we could make it so that every time that you share a content, if the sharing is successful, it automatically adds it to the post array so that users don't have to refresh to view the post that they just shared. And we could also have the reply function, right? So basically when you share a post here, you can see that in the create post function, you have a reply to object and a master object. And for example, you could use the reply to object, the reply to value here to set it to the stream ID that the user is replying. So you could have a reply button, and when the user click on the reply, it would store the reply to value and then share it when you create the post on Orbis. And basically this would create an experience like this. Let me find an example here, for example. So you can see that here we had Felix that shared something on Orbis and Alice who replied. And basically, if we look at the stream on SourceScan, we can see that here the reply to value is indeed set to this stream ID, which is the stream ID of Felix, right? So let's try this. Indeed, it's exactly the same post. So you could use it to make sure that you have, real discussions well organized with people being able to reply to other people's comments, etc. And as I was saying before, because everything is using the same schemas and the Orbis protocol, all of this is fully composable. And if you follow someone on Orbis, you will be able to view what this person is commenting on the internet, which would kind of create this huge, fully decentralized social graph that can be used by developers and by users however they want, which is very exciting and very performant because it's built on top of Ceramic, which is optimized for data storage and decentralized applications like this. So that's it for the workshop. The developer channel on Orbis is a good place to reach out if you have any questions about the SDK itself. So feel free to use it. Feel free to explore the documentation, and do not hesitate to contact us, either me or Charles, if you have any questions about the SDK itself. Thank you, everyone, and good luck for the hackathon.